mucosal glands is it receives the contents of the stomach, which is very acidic and damaging to the mucosal cells, so they have additional. The entire stomach is covered with mucus-secreting cells. So when we get to the duodenum, we have these submucosal glands that can add additional mucus to the surface.
Is that going to be at the pyloric sphincter?
Pardon?
That's at the pyloric sphincter?
Just past the pyloric sphincter. Okay, you guys ready? So then the third layer, I guess I didn't write that on the board, I have it on your lecture notes. This whole pattern is identified as GPAT, which in your lecture it stands for General Plan.
Where's that?
Of the alimentary tract, what I'm talking about. So if I, so as we get to the mouth and the esophagus, I'll talk about the GPAT. And those are the modifications we make to this general plan. So the general plan is the mucosa, the submucosa, and now the muscularis, externa, and serosa that we're going to talk about. All that falls under, it's the general plan of the alimentary tract. Alimentary is just an old name for digestive. Okay, so we talked about the mucosa and the submucosa. So now our third layer is identified as the muscularis. Externa. And our template, we have two layers. It's smooth muscle. And we have an inner circular layer. So the muscle cells are oriented, so they form rings around the digestive tube. And we have an outer longitudinal layer. So you can see in the diagram, I'll show you a couple on the board, because this is a cross-section through a tube, the inner circular layer is showing you the longitudinal cut of the smooth muscle cell. And the outer longitudinal layer is going out into the room and behind the screen, and so those are cut in cross-section. Here's a three-dimensional appearance. So here would be the muscularis mucosa of the mucosa, submucosa, here's the inner circular layer, and then here's the outer longitudinal layer. That provides the movement and contraction of muscle, moving the material through the digestive tract known as peristalsis. So if you've ever lost a drawstring in a hoodie or a pair of sweatpants, not lost it, but it came out of the binding, and you attach a large safety pin to the end of it, make sure you close it, push it back in the hole, and then you can follow it, get it through by bunching it up, bunching up the fabric. Which of these muscles would be the one that bunches up the fabric?
The circular, the longitudinal one.
It's going to shorten it, and then we hold on to that safety pin knot and relax it out. So that holding on would be the circular. Okay, then we bunch it up again. So that pattern of contraction and relaxation between those two is peristalsis. That gives me a good visualization. A few years ago, when the faculty had a white, like a box that you would take home food from a Chinese restaurant over on the counter, and it was kind of scrabbling and moving around on the surface, the counter surface, so I picked it up and peeked inside, and it was a little white mouth. And I said, "What's this for?" Yeah. She said, "I'm bringing my pet rattlesnake in to demonstrate peristalsis to my students." I was like, "Oh, okay, that's a bit dramatic." So you can either visualize the snake, the mouse moving through the snake, or you can visualize the drawstring, whichever, or both.
I'll stick with the drawstring.
with that. Now, we do have a variety of 2 layers of nerves, and Bio430 with autonomic nervous system. At least in my class, I mentioned, I didn't describe it a lot, the enteric nerve plexus. So when we come back to the small intestine, we'll talk about the myenteric is between the inner circular and outer longitudinal, and the submucosal, the older name was Auerbach's, is in the submucosal. It makes it easy to remember. Myo is muscle, and submucosal, okay? So between the 2 layers, I'll just write it in here, but between the 2 layers here, we have the myenteric nerve plexus. And this is a bit of localized control. So when the food stretches the small intestine, all right, these nerves will become active. Submucosal is more closely reliant with the vagus nerve, all right, for secretion and affecting motility. So submucosal plexus is going to be in the submucosa. That then brings us to our 3rd layer, or it's our 4th layer, the outermost layer, which is known as the serosa. So this would be like calling the outer layer of the heart the epicardium, but it was also the visceral pericardium. So the serosa is also the visceral peritoneum. And now it's a serous membrane. So it's going to be formed of loose irregular connective tissue, and simple squamous epithelium. So when you touch the surface of the stomach, or you touch the surface of the small intestine, you're touching that simple squamous epithelium. Same with our epicardium. All right? And so that's indicated on the diagram over here. So here's the simple squamous epithelium, and here's the loose irregular connective tissue of the visceral peritoneum, and then here's a double layer, which would be the mesentery. And if this is the small intestine, this would be superior mesenteric artery and vein branches passing through the mesentery. Okay, so that would be the mesentery proper there. So as we go through the digestive organs, starting with the mouth after break, we will discuss some of the modifications. So for instance, with the mouth, we don't have a serosa. What's the outer covering of the mouth? Skin. Okay? And instead of a smooth muscle, or muscularis externa, we have skeletal muscle, or buccinator and masseter and so on. All right, so we make these modifications. The esophagus doesn't have a serosa because it's not in the abdominal cavity except for about 1 inch of it. So, but this is our template. So as we go through each of the components, we'll go through the GPAT, the mucosa, submucosa, for any variations that might be present. So why don't you take a break, come back at about 5 till, and we're going to talk about the mouth, the structure